We're approaching crunch time, people. We're just days away from the Ben Whittaker versus Liam Cameron rematch. One of the biggest questions heading into this rematch is whether or not Ben Whittaker can make the necessary changes to beat Liam Cameron in this fight. So in this video, I'm going to be specifically looking at Ben Whittaker's style, the things I think he did well and needs to do more of from that last fight, before speculating on his new link-up with Andy Lee and how I feel like that might transform Ben Whittaker in this rematch. We're going to be looking at things on a tactical and technical level of detail and exploring what I feel the things are that Ben Whittaker needs to do to win this fight. Hello everyone and welcome back to a guy called Henry. Guys, before I get into this one, I need to draw your attention to something. There is a link in the description which is for the complete game form analysis that I did for this fight. In this video in particular, we're just going to be talking about specifically what I think Whittaker should be looking to do better in this fight, things he did before that he needs to do more of and not get away from, things that I think he can actually add to his game that will, I think, significantly improve him potentially. And we'll be talking a little bit about Andy Lee and why I think he's the right guy for this. I really do believe Andy Lee's the right guy for this, but there are a couple of caveats and issues that we have to just talk about before we get into this that might mean Andy Lee can't quite work his magic on Ben Whittaker. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, bang that notification bell. Do like the video if indeed you do like this video, and get in the comments section below. Do you think Whittaker can change for this rematch? Or do you think he has changed for this rematch? Because we are right here in fight week. Now, just before we get into the game film, the stuff that I've analyzed technically about Whittaker, a couple of things about the context of this. So the first thing to say is that they only teamed up about a month ago, Andy Lee and Ben Whittaker. Or maybe it was sooner than that, but that's to my knowledge how long ago it was. And it's a very, very short amount of time for Andy Lee to make the necessary changes. There have been camps that I've seen, and ironically it was the one that really comes to mind is Sugar Hill and Tyson Fury. Going into that Deontay Wilder rematch, Fury had a couple of fights in between the first Wilder fight and the second Wilder fight, but the actual training camp period with Sugar Hill, I believe, wasn't very long at all. And obviously, Fury came into that fight with a totally different style, looking to back Wilder up, and it was a very impressive display. But if you look through history, there's not very many examples of fighters changing trainers, going into a rematch with a new trainer and winning, especially on a short amount of time. There's fighters that have gone with new coaches that have suited them much better. Emmanuel Stewart and Vladimir Klitschko immediately comes to mind. Fighters that have been with coaches for longer periods who have transformed their fortunes. A more modern day example would be Ben Davison and Lee Wood. But in general, it's not something that happens too often, where a fighter switches trainers then from a loss and then goes into the rematch with that new trainer and wins. So history is also against Whittaker a little bit here. The other thing to consider here, and we spoke about this a lot in my gloves are off reaction, is Whittaker's mindset and teachability and adaptability going into this rematch. There's all these people saying that he's a difficult character to deal with, that he's quite challenging. I've already heard Andy Lee come out and go on record as saying he's one of the nicest people he's met. He's very teachable. He's happy to work with him. So it seems as though it's all fine. But I guess we'll find out in this fight whether or not Ben Whittaker indeed is adaptable and can make the difference, and whether or not, even though he's kind of acting as though he refuses to acknowledge what happened in the first fight, whether or not he has indeed reflected on it, accepts where he went wrong, and has made significant changes for the rematch. The fact he's changed trainer at all would indicate that that's exactly what has happened. So I'm going to drop in this video now, the game film, the segment from that video that basically breaks down and explains what I thought Whittaker was doing well, why I think Andy Lee and the style of his fighters will suit very well what Whittaker does well, and the things I think that Andy Lee will need to refine. Maybe there's a couple of technical suggestions in there as well. Overall, I feel that there's a lot that he could change. There's so many things he could change. So you don't want to overwhelm somebody in one camp. So I think Lee will probably look to keep it quite simple. And I've heard him talk himself in interviews about his coaching style, and it is very simple stuff. Jabs, 1-2s, hooks, making sure everything's clean, making sure the footwork is correct. Honestly, that might be all Whittaker needs. He might just need to be more disciplined. But I think the other word Andy Lee used in an interview was, he said, I can create discipline and structure. And I think the word structure is a very key one. Whittaker himself had mentioned that he felt he was kind of doing whatever he wanted in training camp. It wasn't very structured and disciplined under his previous coach, Joby Clayton, who was his godfather and previous amateur coach as well. And I think there's two ways you can interpret the word structure. One is structure in the camp, but two is structure in the game plan and the way that you use your talents, which I think is the key thing that Whittaker really needs. He can't just do whatever he feels like in the ring. He needs to box to a plan, because I think that Liam Cameron is underrated, and I actually think he's very good. And I actually think no matter what, his style will be one that Whittaker finds a more challenging style to deal with. Anyway, guys, let's get into this game form analysis, and I hope you enjoy all my thoughts and the technical details that I put forward. Before I move into a detailed breakdown of what Whittaker needs to add, I think it's firstly a good idea to show you when I saw things that were working, because then you might understand a little bit where my head's at and why I think the Andy Lee link up is good. Because early on, and it wasn't for very long because the fight didn't last very long, there was a couple of good things that Whittaker did that I think I'd like to see more of. And a lot of it is to do with pacing and stamina and range control. And if you can implement some of these things, that will be a bit easier. For some reason, he got away from what he was doing with these things. You'd have to ask him why. Maybe he just didn't respect Liam Cameron enough. Maybe he thought he could blow him out of there. Cameron hadn't been that active before this fight. He'd had a couple, but long time out the ring. People didn't realize he was that good anymore. I think mentally Whittaker expected to have it all his own way. So the first thing I want to show you is the jab and when it was working for Whittaker, what he was doing well. Now, this is the first thing that Whittaker got away from. He did use it throughout the fight, but not enough, in my opinion. So watch here. Liam Cameron in his typical position, coming forward with a high guard. Whittaker fires out a double jab. 1, 2. And you'll see neither of them land, but they both hit the guard. And it forces Liam Cameron to reset. Watch what he does. He jumps backwards. He goes backwards out of range. And look at the gap that opens up between the two of them. Absolutely massive. That is very, very important. And we see this a couple times. In fact, every time I think I saw Whittaker land a double jab, Cameron would lunge backwards. He'd take himself out of range. You see it again here. Liam Cameron steps in. That high guard is there. And what I like about this one is a little bit of variation. He exploits the opportunity, which is the body. So steps in, jab upstairs, jab down, second jab downstairs. So a nice double jab, one up, one down. And again, look at the space that opens up between them again. And it's all just from firing 2 jabs. Again here, start of round 2. Cameron steps in, high guard. Again, Whittaker, jab 1, steps in with jab 2. And again, this gap opens up between them. So that double jab is a really effective tool. He did do it multiple times in the fight. And it just forces Liam Cameron to reset. It forces him to reset, and I think it's a crucial tool for him. I think the big thing is making it less predictable, less readable, is probably what I would say. I think that he maybe throws it as an anxious thing, which is not helpful. And I think in general in this fight, he was far too stiff and far too anxious. I think it drained his battery far faster than a man of his fitness level should have got tired. But there's a couple of examples of it there. There's more examples you can see if you want to go and watch the full fight again. But that double jab was very, very nice when used. And actually, in general, I'll just say I won't bother showing you, but there was some nice variation in round 1 with that jab. Upstairs, downstairs, landed some clean shots with the jab. Potentially, the volume of shots he threw in round 1 was a bit much. Maybe he should have just been a bit more reserved, a bit less rushed. Scored a couple of jabs and then made himself secure, controlled the range better. Again, I keep talking about range control. It's probably the biggest factor in this fight for me. And again, I'll talk about how I think he can fix that when we get to that section. The final thing I want to show you that he did very sparingly, was measuring. And that is when you use your lead hand you extend it, you check the range, you bring it in again. You can't hold it there for too long. You can't excessively measure, as some fighters do and are allowed to do. But it's something Andre Ward did a lot in his career, which he got very right. I just want to show you a quick example of when he did it. And again, I don't know why he got away from doing this, but if you watch here, he's standing in front of him. Cameron's making those little steps in, those little steps in there. And you see that. You see what Whittaker does there? Cameron steps forward, Whittaker just takes a little half step back. Okay? And then he checks him. Holds that there. You see that? He's checking the range. Just measures, brings his hand in, another little, and then Cameron takes that step in again. Whittaker holds his feet, he jabs, high, dips his head down, steps out, and Cameron is forced to reset. I think the thing here, I like the measure, I like the jab, because he knows the range. The bit here that I don't necessarily agree with is the dip down. He's looking for the body jab there, which is why Cameron takes a little step back, but it's this constant loading of the legs, these athletic movements that he does. I think he just does it too much. I think he sits heavily in the pocket too much. This lean forward, I've talked about it. I think he can get away with it against opponents who aren't on his level, but against someone like Liam Cameron, who's going to take you long in the fight, who's going to punish you, make you tired, you just don't need to be doing such aggressive movements there. For me, all he's got to do after he lands this shot is take a little half step back, That's all he's got to do, or feint the leg dip. You don't have to actually commit to it so much. So this is an interesting one, and I haven't mentioned this, something I thought Cameron did really well early on. He sort of rope-a-doped him in small moments. He would let Whittaker come onto him. He would back up, get on the ropes, let Whittaker fire off a few shots, and then they'd reset. And I think that he made Whittaker think it was going to be an easier night's work, encouraged him to throw punches, encouraged him to fatigue. You'll see here, watch, he puts his hands up and he goes backwards. Whittaker lands a jab, right hand out, both on the gloves though, and Cameron knows what he's doing. And then he throws a right hand downstairs. That's low. What Whittaker's doing better here is you see he's actually getting his head off the line a little bit. So he throws a little low blow, gets his head off the line, comes up, gets his shoulder in position there. That's actually good. He's got his head here. It's a good position for him. He can rip that right hand in, It's all about trying to free some space there with one of those arms. But what he does here is, look, he measures again. Look, he holds it there. And again, this is not strictly legal. He holds it a bit too long, but you get away with what you can. He's measuring. He's covering Cameron's vision so he can't see what's happening. And from there, he's able to whip in a right hand to the body. And that's good stuff. And then he's able to just get away and they reset. The point here is he didn't do it enough. That measuring, I think, is something he really needs to add into his game more, just like that double jab. So now we're going to talk about, and I've mentioned some of them already, but all the things that Whittaker needs to add. And these are going to tell you why I think Andy Lee is such a good addition, because I think Andy Lee understands all of these things. I mentioned a few of them there. So the measuring, I think, will be very, very helpful. I think the first thing I want to talk about here is lateral movement, because in this fight, Whittaker did use a decent amount of lateral movement, but it was, again, it's the way he does it. He's very, very bouncy and very athletic in the way that he does it. I'm looking for him just to do smaller movements, smaller foot movements, more controlled, more balanced. He also moves in a clockwise direction, an extremely large amount, to the point where I'd say it's quite predictable. So I think he needs to mix it up a bit, his lateral movement. But when we think about Andy Lee and we think about Joseph Parker and we think about Paddy Donovan, both of them use excellent lateral movement. But Paddy Donovan in that fight against Crocker, and again, I think this is a very excellent example of what I'm talking about in terms of the way I think Whittaker can adjust. And again, Donovan, an Andy Lee fighter, measures a lot. And I think there was excessive measuring in the Crocker fight. But again, uses that measuring, checks where the man is, moves off at an angle, moves around, makes sure that he's constantly making small adjustments with his feet, checking where his man is, controlling the range, controlling the distance. I don't think that it's fair to compare Crocker to Liam Cameron in the sense of Liam Cameron, I think, is better than Crocker at the moment. He's got more experience. He knows how to perform at a higher level. But it is a similar approach to things. You know, that high guard, that marching forward, trying to find yourself in the pocket. I believe that there are opportunities to control Liam Cameron more with smaller adjustments, because he is the one who's constantly having to, you know, march forward into range. He's not got the fastest hands, Liam Cameron. They're not as fast as Ben Whittaker's, I don't believe. Whittaker should have the quicker foot speed. So making those adjustments, as long as he's more regular with them, should be better. And I just think he needs to be a bit less explosive with how he does things. More subtlety is basically generally what I'm talking about. So those small foot movements, absolutely essential. I showed you a few times there when he's frozen in the pocket. Those little foot movements, those little foot adjustments would make a massive difference. It's something we see guys like Crawford doing very well when they're in that counter-punching mode. Those little half steps backwards. You're always trying to make your opposition fall short. And by making them fall short and by making them throw from further out, you have more control over what happens. You have more control over making them miss, making them pay, getting your body position right, making sure their feet aren't too close. The first thing he's got to address for me, the biggest thing, he's got to address how easily Liam Cameron got into the pocket. The next thing I think I want to see him do better is feint a lot more. I want to see a lot more feints from Ben Whittaker. The main reason for this is the ease at which Liam Cameron was landing that right hand over the jab. I think if Whittaker was feinting more, you could potentially draw that shot. You could draw that lead right hand from Cameron. And because once you feinted, you're in position, you make him miss, you can then make him pay. So it's trying to anticipate what he wants to do, what he wants to counter. And that's why we call it violent chess. You're trying to draw their move, basically. So now he knows that's a go-to move. I think feinting will be very, very important in this fight. It's also important because, as I said, I felt that his jab was too one-paced. You want to feint. I want him to double up more. I want him to go up and down more. I think the body jab was on plenty of times and he didn't use it. A lot of the time it was because he was looking to do that dip in the pocket, dip the head down, dip to the side, load the legs. I don't want to see him doing that so much. I mean, yeah, there'll be moments when you can do that, but as a general rule of thumb, I see this guy as a longer, rangier fighter with a great jab, great feet, and I think he needs to when you make those small foot adjustments, things open up for you a lot more. So jab variation, feints, really, really important. Making Liam Cameron think more as he's walking in. You don't want to eat those jabs at the end of the day. They are spiteful. Liam Cameron said in a recent interview that the shots didn't hurt, but they certainly did. Those shots, I don't think he's a hellacious puncher by any means, but I definitely think he punches hard enough. And a lot of what he needs to do is draw Liam Cameron. He needs to be more patient. Liam Cameron was a great role model for Ben Whittaker in this fight. He showed such great patience as he marched his way forward, waited for the mistakes, waited till his feet were in the right position, forced him to work really hard. Whittaker needs to fight this at a lower pace, one that he can sustain for longer, basically. We talked about him getting his head off the line when throwing, and that's something that he really needs to do more. He needs to, when he throws that jab, get his head off to the right-hand side. When he throws that right hand, get his head off to the left-hand side. When he throws that body jab, you see Usyk doing it beautifully. He always gets his head off the line. It's so important. And there was multiple times in this fight when Liam Cameron was able to time him with the jab himself. And as I said, it's because his shoulders are so square. So standing more side on, getting yourself off the line more, I think those are two very, very crucial factors for Whittaker. Overall, I feel like Whittaker is a tall, athletic guy, very long, who is trying to fight like a much shorter man. It's almost Mike Tyson-esque the way he dips in the pocket so much, stands so square. He doesn't have, to my mind, the clear punching power for that to be the right way to box for him. And it worked against those guys who were at a lower level. But when you fight somebody who is tougher and stronger than you can't be boxing like that. He doesn't make the most of his natural attributes. Now, I'm going to tell you who he really reminds me of here, and I'm going to take you back to that moment when he was I was showing you that right hand over the top that Liam Cameron threw. So it's this moment here you'll watch. So he extends his jab hand. It goes, it hits Cameron's shoulder, and he sort of brings his jab hand back here, and it means that because it's there, he can get that right hand over the top. Now, there is a fighter that this reminds me of, and it might surprise you. It's Daniel Dubois. There are some things that he does that really remind me of Daniel Dubois. Now, look, this stance here, this is so Dubois-esque, where, you know, your feet, you've got one foot in front of the other, a decent position there. Look how square the shoulders are. That is exactly how Dubois boxes. Look at the hands. You know, Dubois has his guard exactly like that, with that gap up the middle. And something that Dubois does to defend, and because he has his square shoulders like that, it kind of works, is the wedge defense. And I think there's an opportunity for Whittaker to use it. And all he's got to do for it to work, when he throws this shot here, let me pause it there. The first thing he needs to do is keep this arm extended. Keep that extended. If he can, aim it slightly lower for the chest there. Hold it there. And when Cameron comes to throw this right hand over the top, it will catch him on the shoulder. And that's the other thing he's got to do. He's got to dip his chin in behind his shoulder more effectively. Because he likes to use that jab as a first line of defense, and because we know that Liam Cameron likes to lead with that right hand over the top of the jab, the first thing I said before was you can feint more, but the second thing you can do is this wedge defense. Keep it there. And what you'll see is that right hand not working. It's something that Dubois tried to do against Hrgovic. He didn't quite get it right. He didn't quite tuck his chin behind his shoulder enough, which was why he got hit. And then he adjusted it. He did it against AJ, and it went over the top, and those right hands for AJ did not land. They weren't effective. So I think for Whittaker, that wedge defense could be an absolute game changer. It really could. And it just was so, honestly, so odd for me watching it and thinking, God, this guy, those two things there, the stance he has, the square shoulders, really reminds me of Dubois. The benefit of those square shoulders is the power you can get on your jab. You know, that is something that you really do get because the shoulder is further back, you get more rotation on it when you throw it. Dubois he's a very naturally heavy-handed guy anyway, but that extra rotation on that jab makes it super powerful. You know, for the right hand, it also shortens up the distance the right hand has to travel, which means you can use it as more of a shorter shot. It's very good for countering bent arm shots. So, you know, the other thing that he could potentially do there is fire that right hand down the middle and use that. But I think that, you know, that requires a high lead hand, which he's often not got, Whittaker. So there's a couple of different things he can do with that right hand from Liam Cameron. But the Dubois comparison surprised me and I found so strange. But really, those two elements anyway. The rest of it, not so much. But those two elements for sure really reminded me of Daniel Dubois. And, you know, the Dubois is at his best when he's bouncy and moving his feet a lot more. I think, you know, Whittaker for sure needs to move his feet more. It's a similar comparison in that sense. But the rest of it's not similar, but just those two elements. The way he stands looks so much like Dubois. And I think, again, as I say, that wedge defense, I think it could be a big game changer for him. Now, the other thing I think he can do more is throw around the guard a bit more. Because, you know, what do you do with that high guard? And I think this is something that, again, this is something Dubois, I would say I've not seen him do it, but again, I saw him it happened to him in that Hrgovic fight. I'm only on Dubois because it's just something I've seen recently, but there's two things you can do with that high guard because, you know, this is a position that he has to figure out. That Liam Cameron high guard caused him real issues. So watch here. This position here is a good one to show you. So that high guard there. The first area that opens up is the middle of the body. The second area that opens up is here. The third area, and the interesting area for me here, is around the side of the head. There's an opportunity here, what I'm saying is for bent arm shots, if you can occupy that guard for long enough. Behind that jab, you know, Whittaker just needs to find the right time to step in. And when he gets there, there will be options for him and opportunities for him. It's something we saw Beterbiev doing really well against Bivol at times in most of the first fight and sometimes the second fight where he would double jab upstairs and then he'd sling in that right hand either to the body or to the head, sling it in, make him pay, and, you know, go around that high guard. And when you force them into the high guard like that, it's a really good way of landing clean shots. And as you can see, it is there with Liam Cameron. Because he knew Whittaker would be very straight up and down with those punches, a lot of jabs, he was able to use that. But I think those bent arm shots could work really well. The other thing he could do is a bit of guard manipulation, as I mentioned a second ago. And you saw it in a good example of it was when Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clark fought. And you saw there was that great clip of him pulling that lead hand down, and then firing the right hand over the top and hitting clean on the chin. I think that Whittaker, the amount that Liam Cameron is in that high guard, I think Whittaker can try a bit more guard manipulation, pull that guard down, try and do some stuff with it, try and land those shots around it. Final two things I'll say, and there's so much here. I mean, you really get a sense of the scale of the job for Ben Whittaker. And look, maybe he can win it without changing all these things, but if I was looking to build the perfect performance, these are all the things I would consider for him. There was also a few moments in the fight where I felt he bit on Cameron's feints far too much, really reacted. And again, that tires you out and it makes you nervy and scared. And I think that he needs to not bite on them so much, but I think that that comes with controlling the range more and not setting your feet as much. If your feet are already in motion, if you're already making those small adjustments, you don't need to bite on the feint so much. It really does come from having those really planted feet. You're like, oh, damn, I've got to get out of range now, but I've set my feet. So that's what creates that explosive movement. Again, it's reducing those explosive movements, I think will help to manage his stamina so much. The final thing I'll say is this: he's got to manage the pace of the fight better. Really, really needs to pace himself better. A lot of this will help his pacing. A lot of the things I mentioned will really help his pacing. But the final thing, the final comment, pacing is something in boxing that often we don't think about too much as fans, because you sort of see them as these two men on screen. You forget that they've got health bars essentially and gas tanks, just like in a video game. And we've seen it recently. In this fight, I thought Liam Cameron paced himself beautifully through the first few rounds, made Whittaker throw quite a bit more than he was, and then he started to turn the screw when he realized how much this guy was holding his feet, how easy it was for him to enter the pocket. Finding that his means and ways of landing his shots were working, getting around Whittaker's guard, very easy for him in the end, beating his defense, getting him in that pocket. The other fight, again, Beterbiev-Bivol 2, is the one I really think of, where Beterbiev didn't really manage the pace that well this time. I thought Bivol's pacing was very, very good. And I thought Beterbiev started too fast this time. And again, it's something that we just forget. Pacing in boxing, it's a massive, massive factor. And he's got to manage the pacing better. He really, really does. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. As I say, this is part of a bigger game film analysis. The link is in the description. I'm not going to be making my prediction right now. I'm going to be doing that closer to the fight. I want to see what other news comes out. We still haven't heard whether it's 10 or 12 rounds at this point, at the hour of me making this video, which is totally insane. There's lots to analyze and lots to understand still. The weigh-ins will be quite interesting. I've seen some photos of Whittaker. He looks in fantastic shape, but I'm sure Liam Cameron will have left no stone unturned going into this rematch. It's a huge fight for him, for his career, for his family. So as I say, bang a like on the video, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Get your comments in below. Who do you think is going to win this rematch? As I always say, on to the next one.